You won't want to miss this. Before we jump in, hit subscribe, like this video, and drop a comment. Trust me, you'll be glad you did. A sharp intake of breath. Cold water. The sting of reality crashing down. Eisenvel's eyes snapped open. His chest heaved, and his lungs burned as if he had just surfaced from drowning. Panic surged through him, and his mind raced, struggling to piece together what had happened. The memory was fragmented, a blinding light, a sharp impact, then nothing but darkness. As his vision adjusted to the dim, sterile light above, a cold sensation trickled down his face, sending shivers rippling across his body. He tried to move, but his limbs resisted, heavy and unresponsive. Not restrained, he realized, but suppressed. His muscles felt wrong, disconnected, as if an unseen force was holding them back. Eisen's pulse quickened, his instincts roaring to life. He wasn't where he was supposed to be. This wasn't home. The air was too still, the light too artificial, and the sterile metallic scent was foreign. Then, a figure came into focus. She loomed above him, tall but not imposing, with an elegance that defied her presence. Her skin shimmered like polished amethyst under the cool light, her features sharp and alien yet undeniably captivating. Dark indigo hair cascaded down her back in silky waves, framing a face that was both beautiful and otherworldly. Her eyes caught his, piercing, glowing faintly like twin violet orbs. The way she looked at him wasn't curiosity or confusion. It was certainty. "You're awake," she said, her voice smooth as silk. The sound jolted Eisen, breaking through the fog in his mind. His body flared with adrenaline, and he forced himself to sit up despite the heaviness in his limbs. His breath came hard, but he pushed through it. "Where the hell am I?" he demanded, his voice raw, his defiance blazing. The woman tilted her head, amused. So direct. So human. Eisen's muscles tensed further. She spoke with an air of authority, the kind that left no room for questions. Yet he wasn't about to let her dictate the conversation. He scanned the room, a cold, sterile chamber made of sleek, dark metal. The walls seemed to pulse faintly with light, as if alive. "Answer me," he growled. "Where am I?" She took a deliberate step back, clasping her hands behind her back. "You're in my domain, Eisenvel." Her smirk grew wider as his brow furrowed. "My world. And now, you are a part of it." His stomach twisted as fragments of memory struggled to surface. He'd been walking home. It was late, and the streets were empty. Then came the light, brighter than the sun, blinding, overwhelming. His pulse spiked. "You abducted me." "Abducted," she repeated, rolling the word over her tongue. Such a crude way to phrase it. "I prefer to think of it as selection." Selection. He barked out a bitter laugh, pushing himself further upright. "You've got the wrong guy, lady. I'm nobody." Her smirk remained, unshaken. She gestured around the room, the air between them crackling with her presence. "On the contrary, I chose you because you are exactly who I wanted." A chill ran through Eisen as she spoke his name again. How did she know it? She stepped toward a nearby console, her movements fluid and precise. With a flick of her wrist, a holographic display shimmered to life. Earth rotated slowly on the display, a fragile blue orb suspended in space. "You see," she began, her voice softer now, "your world is fascinating to us. So fragile, so chaotic, yet so full of potential." Her violet eyes flicked back to him, glinting with something dangerous. "You, Eisen, represent that potential. The chaos, the resilience, the spark of a species on the brink of something extraordinary." He clenched his fists, his instincts screaming to fight, to resist. "I'm not your science project." "No," she said, her tone dropping. "You are much more." Eisen swung his legs over the edge of the metallic table he had been lying on, planting his feet firmly on the ground. His limbs felt heavier than they should, but he forced himself to stand, meeting her gaze with defiance. "Let me go." Her smirk deepened. "I think not." Before he could respond, the door to the chamber hissed open. Two figures entered, both humanoid but unmistakably alien. Their amethyst skin shimmered like hers, but their faces were colder, more angular, devoid of the smirk she wore so easily. They were clad in sleek, dark uniforms that radiated authority, and their movements were precise, calculated. "Guards," she said, not turning to address them. "Take him to be prepared." Prepared? For what? Ethan's mind raced, but he didn't get the chance to ask. The guards moved toward him, their strides deliberate. His instincts flared, and his body tensed, adrenaline surging. If they thought he was going to cooperate, they were in for a rude awakening. One of the guards reached for him, and Ethan reacted. His fist shot out, connecting solidly with the guard's jaw. The impact sent the alien stumbling back a step, and Ethan felt a flicker of satisfaction. But the second guard was faster. A sharp blow struck his side, pain lancing through his ribs. Ethan grunted, turning to face his attacker, but the first guard recovered quickly, advancing again. Before he could retaliate, a sudden tingling sensation surged through his body. It wasn't pain, not exactly, but an overwhelming pressure, like an invisible force pressing down on him. His muscles locked up, his breath hitched, and his knees buckled beneath him. "What the hell?" he gasped through gritted teeth. The woman, his captor, stood with one hand raised, her fingers splayed. A faint glow traced along her fingertips, pulsing in time with the pressure that held him frozen. She stepped closer, lowering her hand. Instantly, the pressure released, and Ethan collapsed forward, gasping for air. "I told you," she murmured, her voice smooth and unbothered. "You cannot win." Hatred burned behind Ethan's eyes as he forced himself to his knees. The woman studied him for a long moment, then turned back to the guards. "Take him to be prepared," she commanded again, her tone icy. "And make sure he understands his place." The guards hauled Ethan to his feet. He struggled against their grip, but the heaviness in his limbs betrayed him. As they dragged him toward the door, he glanced back at the woman. Her gaze met his, unwavering. Amusement flickered in her eyes, but there was something else there, too: curiosity, challenge, and a chilling certainty. As the door slid shut behind him, Ethan realized one thing with absolute clarity. She thought she had already won. The metallic bands around Ethan Vell's wrists and ankles hummed faintly as he was marched down a sleek, expansive corridor. The guards flanked him on either side, their hands gripping his arms tightly. The bands weren't ordinary restraints, they allowed movement, but Ethan could feel the faint pulse of power within them, a constant reminder of their purpose. He flexed his fingers, testing their weight. They didn't seem heavy, but they radiated a subtle energy that left his limbs tingling, like his body wasn't entirely his to control. The corridor stretched endlessly ahead, its walls made of the same smooth, dark metal as the chamber he had woken in. Thin, glowing lines ran along the edges, casting the space in a soft cyan hue. The air was unnervingly silent, save for the faint hum of the restraints and the rhythmic clinking of their boots against the floor. Ethan's gaze flicked to the massive windows lining one side of the corridor. Beyond the glass, an alien metropolis sprawled beneath a dark, starless sky. The city shimmered with cascading lights, its towers stretching impossibly high into the void. Vehicles zipped silently through the air, glowing trails marking their paths. Bridges of light connected buildings, pulsing faintly with energy. It was a city alive with activity, but it felt cold, sterile, a sharp contrast to the bustling chaos of Earth cities. "Keep moving," one of the guards barked, his tone clipped. Ethan didn't reply. His mind raced as he studied the city. He was far from Earth, that much was clear. But how far? Was this another planet? A station? Something else entirely? And more importantly, how the hell was he going to get out of here? The guards steered him toward a pair of towering doors at the end of the corridor. The doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a massive hall beyond. The first thing Ethan noticed was the light. The hall was vast, its ceiling disappearing into a shimmering dome that reflected the glow of the city outside. The walls were lined with intricate patterns that pulsed faintly, like veins carrying energy through the room. Dozens of figures moved about the space, each one humanoid but unmistakably alien. Like his captor, Solara Vyn, they shared the same amethyst skin and glowing violet eyes. Their clothing, however, varied widely. Some wore sleek, high-collared uniforms, while others were draped in flowing, ornate robes adorned with metallic accents. The air buzzed with low murmurs, their voices a mix of unfamiliar tones and languages. The moment Eason entered, the room fell silent. Every pair of glowing eyes turned toward him, their gazes sharp and calculating. He felt their scrutiny like a weight pressing down on him, their curiosity and disdain almost tangible. Solara Vyn stood at the far end of the hall, her presence commanding. She had changed into a fitted black garment that shimmered faintly under the hall's light, her long indigo hair cascading over her shoulders. She smirked as the guards escorted Eason toward her. "Bring him forward," she commanded. The guards obeyed, shoving Eason to stand before her. He straightened, meeting her gaze with defiance despite the faint tremor in his limbs. Solara raised a hand, silencing the room with a simple gesture. "My esteemed colleagues," she began, her voice smooth and confident, "I present to you something extraordinary." She stepped closer to Eason, gesturing toward him with an almost theatrical flourish. "This is Eason Vel, a human, taken from Earth. A survivor, a fighter, and a testament to the resilience of his kind." Eason's jaw tightened as a ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd. "A human?" someone whispered. "She brought one here." Solara's smirk grew. "I have always sought to challenge the traditions that bind us, to push the boundaries of what our kind can achieve. And now, I bring you proof of humanity's potential. Their adaptability, their strength." One of the figures stepped forward, their silver robes flowing around them like liquid metal. They were taller than Solara, their features sharper, more severe. Their eyes burned with intensity as they regarded Eason with disdain. "Solara," they said, their voice low and edged with warning, "your obsession with the lesser species has always been concerning. But this is reckless, dangerous." Solara turned to face them, her smirk unshaken. "And yet, Relva, it is innovation, progress. Or have you grown so comfortable in your stagnation that you fear change?" A murmur of agreement swept through a small cluster of the crowd, but the tension in the room was palpable. Relva's expression darkened. "You risk much by bringing him here. Do you truly believe this creature is worth it?" Before Solara could respond, Eason spoke up, his voice cutting through the tension. "You know I can hear you, right?" A gasp rippled through the room, followed by a few chuckles. Solara's eyes flicked to him, amusement dancing in their violet depths. Relva, however, was not amused. Their gaze snapped to Eason, their lips curling in disdain. "Bold, for one so insignificant." Eason smirked, his defiance unwavering. "Yeah, I get that a lot." Solara chuckled softly, stepping between them. "You see," she said, addressing the crowd, "humans are not the primitive creatures you imagine. They are bold, unpredictable. They adapt." Her eyes flicked back to Eason, glinting with something dangerous. "And they challenge." The room fell silent again, the tension thick enough to cut. Eason glanced around, noting the varying reactions. Some of the aliens seemed intrigued, even amused, while others looked downright hostile. Not all of them were on Solara's side, he realized. The thought struck him like a jolt. This wasn't just about him. It was about her. This whole display was as much a statement of her power as it was about humanity's potential. And judging by the sharp glances and whispered conversations, not everyone in the room was convinced. Another figure stepped forward, this one clad in a sleek, dark uniform. Their expression was unreadable as they regarded Solara. "You walk a dangerous path, High Sentinel. Bringing a human into our midst risks more than your reputation. It risks destabilizing the order itself." Solara's smirk faded, her expression turning cold. "The order thrives on strength, Torvin. And strength comes from evolution, not stagnation." Torvin's gaze flicked to Eason. "And what if your experiment fails?" "It won't," Solara said firmly. Eason could feel the tension building, the room teetering on the edge of something volatile. He didn't know the intricacies of their politics, but he could recognize power struggles when he saw them. And Solara, for all her confidence, was walking a fine line. As the murmurs resumed, Solara gestured for the guards to step back. "Enough," she declared, her voice slicing through the noise. "You've seen what I've brought. Now, watch what I will do with him." She turned, her gaze locking onto Eason's. "You will stand beside me, Eason Vel. You will prove that humanity is not to be underestimated." Eason met her gaze, his smirk returning. "And if I don't?" Her eyes glinted, a sharp edge to her smirk. "Then you won't survive long enough to regret it." The crowd erupted into murmurs once more, their voices filled with a mix of intrigue, doubt, and simmering hostility. As the guards led him out of the hall, Eason's mind raced. He wasn't just a prisoner. He was a pawn in a game far bigger than himself. But if Solara thought he was going to play by her rules, she was in for a surprise. Eason Vel sat alone in a dimly lit chamber. The air was thick with a sterile stillness, broken only by the faint hum of the glowing panels embedded in the walls. The room, though spacious and seemingly designed for comfort, was a prison. A low table and a sleek chair sat in one corner, while a massive, windowless wall dominated the space. He leaned against the edge of the bed, a smooth, metallic slab covered with something soft but alien in texture. His hands rested on his knees, fingers twitching involuntarily as the hum of his wrist restraints sent faint vibrations up his arms. Every instinct told him to run, to fight, to escape. But he wasn't on Earth anymore. He had no idea where he was, no allies, no resources. His captor, Solara Vyn, had made it clear that he was part of something much larger than himself. He was a statement, a tool in her ambitious game of politics and power. The door to the chamber hissed open, and Solara stepped inside, her presence filling the room like a sudden storm. She wore a high-collared black uniform now, her indigo hair swept back, accentuating the sharp angles of her face. "You're adapting faster than I anticipated," she said, her tone laced with amusement. Eason glanced at her, his expression flat. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" "It's an observation." She stepped closer, her violet eyes studying him. "You're more aware than most would be in your situation. You've already noticed the tension among my people." Eason shrugged, leaning back against the wall. "Wasn't hard to spot. Half the people in that room looked like they'd rather see you dead." Her smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of something colder. "You're not wrong." The silence between them stretched, heavy with unspoken truths. Eason studied her, noting the subtle tension in her posture, the way her fingers twitched slightly at her sides. "This rebellion," he said finally. "It's not just about me, is it?" Her gaze snapped to his, sharp and calculating. "You're perceptive. I've seen enough power struggles to recognize one when I'm in the middle of it," Eason said, his tone dry. "They don't just hate me, they hate what you're trying to do." Solara exhaled softly, turning to face the wall. Her fingers brushed over a panel, and a section of it shimmered, revealing a holographic map of the city. "The Lumenis Order has ruled for centuries," she began, her voice quieter now. "We value tradition, stability, and control. But that control has made us stagnant. My vision threatens that stagnation." She turned back to him, her expression unreadable. "You are a symbol of that vision, Eason, a species on the brink of something extraordinary, unshackled by the constraints of our tradition. Your presence here is proof that we can evolve." Eason scoffed. "So, what? You brought me here to make a point." "To make the point," she corrected, "that survival is not enough. That we must adapt, or we will fall." He frowned, processing her words. There was conviction in her tone, but there was something else, too, an undercurrent of desperation. "And what happens if they don't buy it?" he asked. Her smirk returned, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Then I'll make them." Before Eason could respond, the room suddenly trembled. A faint, distant rumble reached his ears, followed by the flicker of the lights overhead. Solara stiffened, her head snapping toward the door. Her fingers twitched at her sides, and Ethan saw a flash of something he hadn't expected: concern. "What the hell was that?" he asked, rising to his feet. She didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the doorway. Then she turned to him, her voice sharp and controlled. "Stay here." "Not a chance," Ethan shot back, stepping closer. Solara's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, the door hissed open again. One of her guards stepped inside, their expression carefully neutral, though Ethan caught the tension in their stance. "My lady," the guard said, dipping their head. "There has been a breach in the lower sectors." Solara's expression darkened. "A breach?" The guard hesitated. Small, controlled. It seems deliberate, almost as if it was meant to draw attention. "A distraction," Solara muttered, her mind clearly working through the possibilities. Ethan crossed his arms. "Sounds like someone's testing your defenses." Solara shot him a glance, her gaze sharp. Then she turned back to the guard. "Lock down the primary access points. Increase surveillance in the upper levels." The guard hesitated, their eyes flicking to Ethan. "And the human?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Yeah. What about me?" Solara studied him for a long moment, then made her decision. "He stays with me." The guard nodded, though their hesitation was obvious. "As you wish." Once they were alone again, Ethan turned to her, his expression skeptical. "You sure about that? I'm not exactly the quiet, obedient type." She smirked, though it lacked her usual amusement. "You're safer with me than anywhere else in this city right now." "That's not exactly comforting." The lights flickered again, and another rumble shook the room, this one closer than the last. Solara's smirk faded entirely, replaced by a steely determination. "Come on," she said, striding toward the door. "Where are we going?" Ethan asked, following her despite his better judgment. "To find out who's trying to kill me," she replied without looking back. The corridors outside were no longer silent. The distant blare of alarms echoed through the halls, mingling with the faint sounds of footsteps and muffled voices. The air was charged with tension, and Ethan's instincts screamed that danger was close. Solara moved with purpose, her strides quick and deliberate. Ethan struggled to keep up, his thoughts racing. "Is this normal for you?" he asked, glancing around nervously. "Assassination attempts," she replied, her tone flat. "No. Rebellion? Rarely." "Great," he muttered. "Glad to know I'm here for one of the rare occasions." Solara ignored his sarcasm, her focus entirely on the path ahead. They turned a corner, and she suddenly froze, her hand shooting out to stop him. "Quiet," she hissed. Ethan tensed, his eyes scanning the corridor. At first, he didn't see anything. But then, a shadow moved. Two figures emerged from the far end of the hallway, their movements swift and calculated. They were clad in dark, tactical gear, their faces obscured by helmets. Assassins. Before Ethan could react, Solara raised her hand. A faint glow traced along her fingertips, and a pulse of energy shot out, striking one of the assassins in the chest. They crumpled instantly, their body hitting the ground with a sickening thud. The second assassin hesitated for a split second before bolting in the opposite direction. Solara lowered her hand, her expression unbothered. "Coward." Ethan exhaled sharply. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." Her smirk returned, though it was fleeting. "Stay close, human." They continued down the corridor, the tension growing with each step. Ethan's mind raced as he tried to process everything. This wasn't just a random attack, it was calculated, precise. Someone wanted Solara gone, and they weren't wasting time. But as he glanced at her, he realized something else. She wasn't just a target. She was a symbol. And if she fell, everything she represented, her vision, her ambition, her fight for change, would fall with her. The explosion rattled the ground beneath Ethan's feet, shaking the walls and sending a tremor through the air. Smoke drifted in through a vent above, faint but growing stronger with each passing second. Solara moved swiftly, her steps decisive as she led him through the dim corridor. The faint glow from the wall panels flickered erratically, casting jagged shadows that danced like restless spirits. Eason stayed close behind her, his mind racing. "This isn't just a rebellion, is it?" he asked, his voice low but steady. "No," Solara replied curtly, her focus locked ahead. "What then?" She glanced back at him briefly, her violet eyes cold and sharp. "It's an execution." Her words hung in the air like a blade poised to strike. Eason's pulse quickened as he processed the implications. This wasn't a spontaneous act of defiance. This was deliberate, calculated. Someone had waited for the perfect moment to strike, and Eason's presence had provided the excuse they needed. They turned a corner, entering a wider passageway lined with windows overlooking the alien city. Outside, plumes of smoke curled into the sky, their dark tendrils snaking between the glowing spires. The city that had seemed so pristine earlier was now a battlefield. "What's the plan?" Eason asked, his voice tinged with urgency. Solara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pressed a hand against a panel embedded in the wall. A holographic display flickered to life, showing a map of the city. Red dots blinked across the screen, concentrated around her estate and the surrounding sectors. "They are focusing on the upper levels," she muttered. "They'll try to isolate me, cut off my escape routes." Eason frowned. "And what about the lower levels?" "They're using them as bait," she said. "A distraction to pull my forces away from critical areas." "Classic misdirection," he muttered, his instincts kicking in. Solara turned to him, her gaze calculating. "You've seen this kind of strategy before, haven't you?" "Not exactly like this," he admitted. "But yeah, I know the playbook." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Then you understand why we need to act quickly." "Act quickly to do what?" he asked. "To survive," she replied, her voice cold. Before he could respond, the panel emitted a sharp beep. Solara's expression darkened as a new alert appeared on the screen. "They've breached the central tower," she said, her tone grim. "Is that bad?" She turned to him, her eyes narrowing. "That's catastrophic." Another explosion rocked the building, this one closer. The lights overhead flickered violently before stabilizing, casting the corridor in an eerie half-light. "Move," Solara ordered, striding forward. Eason followed without hesitation. The central tower was a scene of chaos. Smoke and fire filled the air, mingling with the sharp scent of scorched metal. The once pristine hallways were littered with debris, and the bodies of Solara's guards lay scattered across the floor. Sparks rained down from exposed wiring, and the distant echo of gunfire reverberated through the structure. Solara didn't falter. She moved with precision, her every step calculated, her every action deliberate. Eason followed closely, his eyes scanning for any sign of movement. "They're closing in," Solara said, her voice low but urgent. "How do you know?" he asked. She tapped a device on her wrist, and a faint holographic display appeared, showing a series of blinking dots moving steadily toward their position. Eason clenched his fists. "What happens if they reach us?" "They won't," she said simply, her tone leaving no room for doubt. They reached a junction, and Solara stopped abruptly. She raised a hand, motioning for Eason to stay silent. For a moment, there was nothing but the distant hum of the city and the crackle of nearby fires. Then, a shadow moved. Eason barely had time to react before two figures emerged from the smoke, their movements swift and predatory. Assassins. Solara moved first, her hand glowing with a faint violet light. With a flick of her wrist, a pulse of energy shot forward, striking the first assassin in the chest. The figure crumpled instantly, their body convulsing as the energy coursed through them. The second assassin lunged at Eason, a blade flashing in the dim light. Instinct took over. Eason dodged the first strike, his movements quick despite the lingering heaviness in his limbs. The second strike came faster, the blade slicing through the air toward his chest. He caught the assassin's wrist mid-swing, twisting hard enough to hear a sharp crack. The assassin hissed in pain, but before Eason could follow through, Solara intervened. Her energy pulsed again, and the assassin dropped, their body limp. Eason exhaled sharply, his pulse pounding. "You've got some impressive moves," he said, glancing at her. "You're learning," she replied, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. Before either of them could say more, a new sound filled the air, a voice, smooth and cold, echoing through the tower's comm system. "Solara Vyn," the voice said, dripping with disdain. "I warned you about the consequences of your ambition." Eason stiffened. He recognized the voice. It was Relva, the silver-robed figure who had confronted Solara during the gathering. Solara's expression darkened, her jaw tightening. "Relva," she muttered. The voice continued, mocking and triumphant. "Your defiance ends here. Surrender now, and I may grant you a quick death." Eason glanced at Solara. He's enjoying this way too much. Her smirk returned, cold and sharp. Let him gloat. It won't save him. They reached the tower's control room, a massive circular chamber filled with consoles and holographic displays. The room was eerily empty, the usual hum of activity replaced by an oppressive silence. Solara moved to the central console, her fingers flying over the controls. "What are you doing?" Eason asked, stepping closer. "Reconfiguring the tower's defenses," she replied. "If I can reroute the energy grid, I can lock down the upper levels and cut off their access. And if you can't?" She glanced at him, her smirk faint. "Then we fight." Another explosion shook the tower, and Eason braced himself against the console. The displays flickered, and Solara cursed under her breath. "They're overriding the system," she said, her voice laced with frustration. "Can you stop them?" "Not in time." Eason clenched his fists, his mind racing. "Then what's plan B?" Solara didn't answer immediately. She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the console. "Eason," she said finally, her voice quieter. He frowned. "What?" She turned to him, her expression uncharacteristically serious. "You need to leave." "What?" he said, his voice rising. "I'm not leaving you here." "You don't have a choice," she said firmly. She pressed a small device into his hand, a beacon. "This will guide you to an escape pod. Use it. Get out of the city." He stared at the device, then back at her. "And what about you?" Her lips curved into a faint, bittersweet smile. "I have a rebellion to end." Before he could protest, the room shook violently, and the lights flickered out. "Go!" Solara shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Eason hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Don't die on me, Solara." Her smirk returned, faint but defiant. "No promises." The escape pod launched into the void, its engines humming softly as it soared away from the city. Eason sat in the cramped cockpit, his eyes fixed on the distant skyline. Smoke and fire continued to consume the city, but he could still see the faint glow of the central tower. He clenched his fists, the weight of Solara's sacrifice heavy on his chest. She had saved him, but she had also given him something else, a chance to fight back. As the pod's navigation system guided him towards safety, Eason made a silent vow. This wasn't over. Not for him. And not for Solara.